this session so that others can hear it. I'd like to welcome all of you to this call this morning, this Shine community call. My name is Fletcher Harper. I'm the interim director of the Shine campaign and the director of Green Faith, one of Shine's co-founders. We're an international multi-faith climate and environmental justice network. And we're here today because for the last couple of years, the Shine campaign in a determined way has been building a community of faith-based, philanthropic, and other partners who are committed to approaching energy access with an emphasis on accelerating support for community-owned and led, women-owned and led, truly last-mile energy access enterprises and solutions, and the ecosystem necessary to support the growth of that vital part of the energy access community. And one of the things that we've run into consistently is an assumption that there are not at the last mile investable enterprises, coordinated, led, directed at the community-led, women-led level. And we got curious about that because our instinct was that that might not be true. And so today, what we're going to hear about is the fruits of research that the Shine team has conducted, and also some of the remarkable leaders who we think represent a vital and underserved part of the energy access world that we want our philanthropic and religious and values-driven donor and investor partners to know more about. Please feel free to use the chat function to introduce yourself, to pose questions. We'll have time for questions and responses to those, and we'll do our best to pull those questions off the chat. We're going to keep everybody except the speakers on mute so that we get a good, clean recording. And without any further delay, I'm going to pass the microphone to Mark Carenti, who is Shine's Managing Director of Investments and who headed up the research project that we're going to be talking about today. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Fletcher. First of all, did a quick scan to see who's on the call today, and it's really great to see many of you. The circumstances are such we don't get together all that often. We haven't been together physically, but it's great, at least virtually, to see many, many faces. So a good day today. Yes, just to pick up on where Fletcher was going with in terms of really this narrative and challenging this narrative about the degree that the last mile enterprise organizations are investment ready. And last year, we really heightened our focus on last mile at Shine. We really heightened our focus on community-led organizations and women-led initiatives. And we therefore needed a database. And some of us had this in our minds and in our experiences, but we said we really got to put this into a concrete fashion in the form of a pipeline to be able to respond to a lot of our partners who are funders, who are investors in the space with actionable research that they can go out and do. And so we looked around, didn't really see anything out there that fit the bill. So we went and really started on our own and developed our own pipeline. The pipeline is about 3 stages in 3 tiers in terms of its work. It looks at historically where the organizations have been. It looks at the kinds of capital that and funding that organizations need going forward. But we also were very adamant about making it truly last mile, truly women-led, truly community involved in terms of solutions. And so we put this pipeline together, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So the screen you see in front of you is my 6 or 7 minutes of comments. I also want to make one other comment before we get into some of the findings of this pipeline. And that is that the pipeline here, based on the findings, based on after we were done and we looked at what we have uncovered, we said we really have to challenge the narrative out there as to the readiness for investment, for financial support at the last mile. That narrative, by and large, has been controlled by impact investors and others who have their own limitations and are doing their best. But then again, if you look at what the constituency of that group, if you look at GIN data, for instance, 85% of that group is market rate driven, 15% is concessional. We know market rate is tough for last mile, but some folks even on this call are working, blending last mile kinds of capital from market rate investors. But even concessional in dollars, the cost of capital can be really too high there as well. And yet those are the same folks that have really been controlling the narrative about how ready the last mile is for investment. So let's dive into some of the findings that we have found, and then we'll turn it over to a couple of speakers that we think really exemplify some of these key characteristics within this pipeline. So for the next slide, please, Daniela, thank you. So when we went out and did this pipeline, we came back and we said, okay, please answer 15 to 19 questions, but these are the 3 most important. And we got over 100 recipients back for our first generation. We're going to do other generations of this pipeline. But the first generation of pipeline, and over 100 respondents came back and said they were 100% dedicated to last mile communities, 98% that they really elicit high community involvement or ownership. Today, we're going to talk with RVE Saul, who does work in mini grids in Eastern Africa, and where they've taken a very high standard to implementing those mini grids in villages where 100% of villages, shops, etc., are lit, do receive electricity as part of their projects. And it really sets a high bar for others in terms of connections within villages. And then we also in our work found that 88% of our respondents, over which there was 100 of them or more, said that they'd really incorporate women-led initiatives. And so today we're going to hear from Savita over at Aurora Global a little bit later. She's going to talk about productive use, women-led initiatives, and she's really taken this to a large degree, a further extent in terms of doing profit sharing, financial sustainability, and ownership with these productive use folks in women-led initiatives. And we'll talk with her a little bit later on as well. So those are our first early findings. Very quickly to the rest of our findings. What we found at the last mile with these energy access providers is that 63% had been in operation for 4 or more years. 92% had financial models, business models that were for profit. Either they were exclusively for profit, which were 69%, or they had hybrid structures that were both for profits and nonprofits. So 92% had business models that were looking for earned income. And then 48% delved into productive use. We think of productive use being much less than that, but no, that has come a lot further in terms of its maturity and a lot further at the last mile in terms of productive use. Next page. We then said, we also gathered information on things like revenues and found that almost 50%, 46%, had annual revenues of $500,000, $500,000 USD or more. In terms of seeking capital, 62% were looking for $500,000 or more. So a real sign as to not just the number of enterprises in the last mile, but the maturity level at which they're operating at. And then in terms of, and this gets to it as well, in terms of equity, almost 50%, 49% of those enterprises were seeking equity in addition to debt, in addition to grants. And still most of them are seeking grants. And what we've found really working at Shine and working with others is that in the grant world, we can take that a lot longer in terms of company stages, et cetera. So there's always opportunities for grants, but almost 50% were seeking equity at the last mile. Next, thank you, Daniela. We then went and did some further surveys looking at women-led, small surveys. We want to do this periodically, so we kept them small, but very interesting in terms of the results. And we went out and surveyed for women-led initiatives amongst this group. And on the left-hand side, you can see some of the companies that responded to this survey. And what we found is that we could break down women-led initiatives really into 6 major categories, from human resources to design and manufacturing, to livelihoods, productive use, much more in financial sustainability, and then finally in special contexts like displaced, refugee camps, hospitals, schools, etc. And on the left-hand side, this just gives you a flavor for some of the respondents that came back and where they are doing women-led initiatives. And many of them are doing in more than one category. We just try to get at least one category down for each of the respondents there. And so, folks like Solar Sister with sales agents in women-led initiatives, one of the pioneers, but also in ownership, which will be like Jada over Frontier Markets, or Beta Sasa in terms of having women-led companies, but women-owned and founded enterprises as well. And then lastly, we surveyed for community involvement and how they go about doing this work. How do they approach communities? Who do they use to approach communities? And we really elicited some best practices in terms of this work that we did. And what we found is, just to name a few, and so a lot of these are obvious to the folks on this call, but to the extent possible, utilize rural resources, rural staffing, locally sourced raw materials, so that the benefits that flow from working at the last mile are not just electrification itself and the ensuing benefits, but there's also ancillary and associated benefits as well. What are the kinds of partnerships that need to be secured? Interesting on the other side, on the right side, rural experience centers. What we found is that some folks were setting up kind of mock homes, mock companies, etc., and demonstrating, particularly in productive use, what this is going to look like going forward, so they can see for the first time electrification, what are the benefits, and moving forward, and kind of envision what this is going to look like for their villages. And then finally, saw some strong work in market linkages, again, in productive use, where the companies themselves, once they had their product that was derived, how do they create the necessary new linkages to markets in the sales of those products? So this is basically a quick overview of some of the work we've done. We've developed this pipeline. It helps us with our funders, with folks in the faith-based world that Fletcher talked about, in foundations and others who are looking to get involved, either for the first time or on an ongoing basis. And it really helps us align to their missions so that we can point them in the right direction, again, with concrete and actionable kinds of work, specific enterprises that they may want to take a look at, and or specific funds to take a look at as well. We do both of that kind of work. We're going to take questions on this later during our session. We have 2 speakers that I quickly want to introduce and let them move forward. Savita is with Aurora Global, and she is really done some strong work with productive use, women-led initiatives. She has a really nice presentation, and we'll be taking Q&A afterwards. And then Bertha and Lamech from RVE Seoul in the mini grid space, Eastern Africa, with some real, again, high standards, and have really refined it. And we'll get into some of their work in terms of looking at electrification on a 100% basis based on the ability to pay. So let's start with Savita first for 8 or 9 minutes, and then we'll turn it a little bit later over to Bertha. Savita?
Mark, just on a housekeeping level,
Yes.
Several people have been asking me in the chat about, will we share the participants list and the list of comments that are being left in the chat? And the answer is yes. We don't have everybody's permission to share contact information. So I would suggest that if you want to do that, you can do that in the chat. And we'll be looking in the future at how we might facilitate easier connectivity amongst participants within the community. But just wanted to put that out there. And thanks so much. People are really valuing what's being shared in the chat. So keep it coming.
Okay, great. Savita, all yours.
Thank you so much, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I'm Savita Sridharan, CEO and founder of Aurora Global. And I'm really grateful to the Shine community for providing me this opportunity to share Aurora's sustainability journey. Daniela, next slide. So let me start with the story of Lakshmi, a 25-year-old mom that lives in the village of Amur in Trichy, which was once known for its agricultural income and sustainability. But today, because of climate change and global warming, the rivers are drying up in this community, and she has lost all her agricultural income. She's looking for well-paying jobs, but can't find any in her community, and constantly lives in the fear of crime, health hazards, and her children don't have good quality education. Next slide. Lakshmi is only one in 1.1 billion people around the world who still do not have access to electricity even today. So overall, these communities are growing in a very unsustainable manner. Next slide. This is where I think we can bridge the gap by bringing a community-based, women-led organization with beyond the triple bottom line sustainability as the value proposition. So we are Aurora Global, a social enterprise focused on bringing climate resilient, sustainable communities using renewable energy as a vehicle for innovation. Our programs are built in such a way that we provide more employment opportunities for women and youth in the community. When I say beyond the triple bottom line sustainability, we're looking at sustainability at 4 levels: social, environmental, financial, and last mile access. Now next slide. Now let's take a deep dive into what I mean by social sustainability. So here's a picture of the women that are working in the solar production center at Aurora Global. So let's go back to the village that we started, where Lakshmi comes from. So we hired 30 women from there who do not have good income, and we're looking for alternate sources of income. Given the cultural background of the women, they were not allowed to stay out of work beyond 5 p.m. in the evening or get involved in processes like installation of rooftop. So it made sense to set up a production center and allow the women to come to work every day and go back at 5 p.m. So we taught these women basic electronics, solar engineering, how to produce home lighting systems, solar street lights, and power hubs. And they work with us and earn a living. And that's how we've been able to achieve social sustainability. The men in the community take care of installation of the solar rooftops. Next slide. Now let's look at how we have achieved energy sustainability. This is with our product that we have called as the Aurora Power Hub, which is basically a plug and play mini grid solar solution that can be installed on any community center, which needs reliable access to electricity. So it's a 3 kilowatt solar solution, which powers the community center for 12 to 16 hours a day and provides a backup for 3 to 4 hours with lithium ferrophosphate battery. The Aurora Power Hub basically operates either in a solar only mode or in a solar and electricity hybrid mode. And this is useful when the weather conditions are not very convenient. Next slide. The internal and the external lighting that we have in these Aurora Power Hubs are all high efficiency LED lights and solar street lights with 91 to 96% energy saving. And all these lights are produced by the women in the community. So it's completely self-sustainable. Next slide. So here's an example of what one of the Aurora Power Hub looks like. This is what we have installed in the garment manufacturing unit in Trichy in India, although this can be set up on any manufacturing hub. Previously, the hub used to use diesel during power cuts, and the women had to work till 4 a.m. in the morning the next day to meet the market deadlines. But now with the Power Hub, they were able to work reliably. It costs about 10K USD to set up one of these hubs, which provides power for 10 sewing machines and provides employment for 20 women in the community. And at the same time, reduces greenhouse gas emission by 1.8 metric tons. So this has helped us achieve a triple bottom line sustainability because it has improved the productivity by 10 times, reduced the carbon emission by 15 times, and has been able to provide the women 4 times more the salary that they have been able to earn. Next slide. To bring, this is not a one person's job. The whole community becomes a stakeholder in this process, and it's a 5-step process that we use to reach this. One is partnering up with a strategic partner on the ground who can bring us a large market. Second, training a local electrician and teaching them how to set up and maintain the Aurora Power Hub. Third, working with the local community center and co-designing solutions for the market, like we did for garment manufacturing. It could be for any manufacturing. Fourth, to install. And fifth is to service it for 3 to 5 years. Next slide. Now let's talk about how we achieve financial sustainability. Financial sustainability in the community is brought about by the profit sharing model that we have, which is between the stakeholders for 5 years. For example, in this manufacturing hub, for garment manufacturing, there are 5 partners: the NGO that brought us the community, the women that work at the center. The third person is the clean energy investor. Fourth person in the fourth stakeholder is the apparel partner, which gets the garment orders. And fifth is Aurora, the solar partner. So in this profit sharing model, the women have been able to earn 4 times more and now can earn up to $200 a month, which is a lot from where they come from. So in 1 month, the clean energy investor can get back about 20% of the investment. So in 6 months, we can break even. So this is how we achieve financial sustainability. Next slide. The last type of sustainability that we talk about is the last mile sustainability. We want this to be possible in any rural community. We don't want people to be traveling from, say, Bangalore to 360 miles to fix the solar issue. So what we have done is we've had a production center, a distribution network, and a customer service agent, which are our women, who can fix any electrical issues locally itself. Like, for example, yesterday morning, they called us at 4 a.m. in the morning and said, we were able to fix the water pump all on our own, which is solar powered. And these were the very women who once thought that they would die of electric shocks if they worked with electricity. So they've come a long way from where they started. Next slide. So we currently have 2 such Aurora Power Hubs that we have already installed, and 10 more which are in the process of installation. By the end of this year, we are looking to install about 24 more of these Aurora Power Hubs just in that neighborhood. Through COVID, it has been really, really difficult to travel to these rural locations. So we have integrated with Augmentaire, which is world's first AI/AR solution, where we have put all the material with remote diagnostics, training, and configuration online. And the women we've sent them the smartphones, and the women can use the smartphone and follow the instructions on how this can be done. Next slide. So our current business model basically touches 14 of the 17 UN Sustainable Goals at 3 levels. One at the level of the worker, second at the level of consumer of the Aurora Power Hub, and third at the level of local community. The women that work in our center have been able to break their debt cycles from the salary that they've been earning from the last 3 years, and have been able to eliminate domestic violence as well. And now they're able to get a better health facility for themselves because of their earnings. At the community level, they've been able to support each other as a group, share, discuss, resolve hardships at the domestic front, as well as at the community front during COVID. So women have basically become decision makers at home and are also shifting social equations in the community. In the next 5 years, we want to install about 500 more Aurora Power Hubs in these communities and bring jobs to 10,000 more women, all generating 1.5 megawatts of decentralized power and reducing the greenhouse gas emission by 3.2 kilotons. Next slide. So here we have a wonderful opportunity to take the problem of energy poverty and climate crisis and convert it into an entrepreneurial opportunity for women to shine. So I welcome the Shine community to come join with us on this journey and help our women shine as Aurora builds climate resilient communities globally. Happy to take questions at a later point.
Thank you, Savita. Perfect Thank you for doing that. Yeah, the questions are starting to come. We'll take them a little bit later. They kind of vary. Let's turn it now over to Bertha and Lumek in terms of RVE Sol and the work they're doing in terms of lighting villages at a very, very high bar, a very, very high level at 100%. So Bertha, please take it away. And Bertha, you're on mute. And Lubumba, yes. Go ahead, Lubumba.
Yeah, thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. It's evening in Kenya, so probably the hours are different in other places. We want to just tell the story of Aurora Power, which is a subsidiary of RVE Sol. It is principally a mini grid developer. That's what we do. Could you move to the next slide, please? Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so I was saying that we are principally just a mini grid sets us apart from the rest of the park or the people, or the companies in the sector, is that we focus a lot more in terms of connecting everyone as we go into a community. So we go into a community with the goal of connecting anyone who is there, who's willing to be connected. And we end up achieving a very high percentage of penetration, mostly at about 95%. In some cases, we have hit 100% connection. That is not very easy to do, because most of the people we are dealing with are people at the bottom of the pyramid, and many developers just put them aside and say these are not people worth doing business with, because they'll be spending probably $20, $30 a month worth of electricity purchase, which may not make sense to some developers. But for us, we go into this with a noble mission of getting everyone connected and empowering these communities as well. So principally, it's electricity generation and the community level. And then we focus on other things that make the lives of the community members improve. And we do it clearly with a mission of eventually empowering these community members and lifting them up to a level where they're able to do things that they're not able to do before, while at the same time enjoying modern electricity, just like anybody else around the world. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the theory of change, but it just outlines the way we look at the business, the whole business of delivering these services to these communities. We look at the outcome that we expect to see.
The participants.
Yes, yeah, we look at the outcomes that we expect to see at the community level, and eventually the kind of impact that we'd like to achieve at the end of a specific period time frame. So when we talk of electricity, for instance, and we go into a community, we are providing the electricity, and then we encourage the community members to adopt productive use of electricity. And then we also provide some training as well as some microfinance models to be able to empower them with stuff that they are not able to acquire outright on their own. Then the SME tends to pick up, micro enterprises tend to pick up quickly in these communities. And then the incomes and jobs and all these other things affiliated with that kind of structure start falling into place. So Kudura has the end game in sight at the very beginning. As we are providing these services, there's certain things that we'd like to see, and we keep assessing them as we go along to find whether we are really making that impact or not, in which case then we would need to revise our strategy. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes, community engagement. I want to spend a bit of time on this. When we get into a community, the first thing we do is we constitute a project management committee, which is drawn from local community members. And we do this at the time of entry. And this team who become members of the project management committee are the first point of call in terms of subsequent engagement with that community. So they help us around to be able to get into these communities, and they help us even identify the customers, the early customers who want to be connected. And they also guide us in terms of the people that we could hire or use their services. So this is a very key group, and it's a very unique thing that we identified pretty early at Kudura, that it is a good way of getting into a community. And one other thing that we do is we hire our customer experience agents from the local communities. So they must be residents of that community. And once we hire them, they continue to reside in those communities and engage with the customers on a regular basis and report to us any issues that may emerge with regard to the service delivery. We also make a deliberate effort by offering a good mix of appliances or SME equipment that would appeal to both men and women, so that women are not left behind, but they also feel part and parcel of the project itself. In addition to that, we don't just hire customer experience agents only within the community. We also give first priority to community members for all unskilled labor requirements during installation and even afterwards. And the security of the infrastructure we establish at these communities is also done by local community members. So we have a very good relationship with communities where we operate because of some of this conscious strategy, this deliberate strategy that we adopted as part of our entry into these communities. Next slide. Yes, I think it was Fletcher who mentioned that this is the Kudura model, the RVSO model. We mobilize finances from funders to be able to do what we do, and the money is able to be recouped from the proceeds of that we get from our customers, and be able to go again to be able to take care of those funders that we need to pay back. We use a blend of financing. There is, of course, a grant element that is critical at these early stages, and when you're serving the kind of people we are serving, whose incomes
they try to copy some information.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm just saying that we use a blend of funders, of financing, of capital, both debt as well as, we're even considering equity at this point, and as well as grant funding to be able to do that which we do. So financing is critical. One thing I would say at this point is that for us to be able to do what we do, we need some kind of patient capital that whoever is investing in us, in our company, will be willing to wait a little longer to recoup their investment. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so I take it up from there.
I would want to hand over to my colleague, Bertha, to pick it up from this. This is the main thing that drives our belief and philosophy. Bertha.
Thank you, Lumumba. Thank you, Lumumba. Hi, team. So BUA is the idea that all global citizens deserve access, in the core utilities. And BUA means universal basic utility access. And what are we talking about in terms of access? Is this access to clean water, access to affordable power, access to internet, access to safe fuels. So this is a philosophy that Aurora Power East Africa has incorporated in our system. And this is what we use to ensure that all our customers are all inclusive. Next slide, please.
Bertha, this is Mark. Let's kind of start the Q&A right now, but keep with you because we're getting a few questions on this as we knew we would. So right now we're gonna move our way into Q&A. And Bertha, if you could use this particular slide, there's a question regarding, how it's 100% connectivity based on ability to pay. Sarah Baird asked the question that there's going to be folks that have very low, if any, incomes, maybe the elderly. How do you address those kinds of folks within this concept?
Yes, so actually the next slide was talking about the different tier system that we have put across in Kudura. It's the slide you have just left, the upper slide. And we ensure that we have connected 100% in a community, regardless of our customers' source of income or their income levels. So we have a tier kind of program that we have connection fees running from 3,000 shillings to 10,500. And the other thing that we have done to ensure that we have 100% connectivity is if somebody does not have that kind of amount as connection fee, we still end up connecting them, but then they pay it on a fee, we call it a split billing, which means that as they purchase their token, then 50% of that goes to the connection fees and 50% goes to their token. The token is generated on the 50%. So yes, we cover 100% in terms of connectivity, and it doesn't matter whether they are on the low income levels or on the high income levels.
Now, I have another question in regards to this. As people's incomes improve, are you able to understand or capture that and change the tier systems, move them into different tiers based upon their increases in income over time? Is it that dynamic yet?
Yes, we have.
Absolutely.
And we are keeping data, because when we started, some of them joined in tier 1 or tier 2, and as they progress, some of them want upgrade, and then they move to the next tiers. The reason being, and that is why we are saying maybe the economic levels have improved, because they end up purchasing appliances, which will allow them to upgrade. Which means if they were on the lower tiers, they weren't able to use these appliances, so they needed to upgrade to the next tier.
Let me do one more here, then I'll turn it over to our other panelists. What we've seen in India is that the connection fees are extremely high, so that the government says that 100% connectivity in India means that there's an actual pole in a village and at least one connection in that village. Doesn't really address the rest of the cost of connectivity to that pole. So in your model, where it's universal and the ability to pay ongoing, how do you address the connectivity fees as well? The initial connection fee.
Yeah, and that's what I said. The initial connection doesn't have to be paid before we actually do the connections. We do the connections, and those who are unable to pay the initial connections, which again, they are last 12 months installments. But still, if we have one pole and we have 5 different households to be connected, then we have a split billing method. And a split billing means when they do not have this, the full amount of the connection fee, which is quite minimal, then when they purchase their token, then part of it, which is 50%, goes for the connection fee, and the other part of it goes for token generation. So no one is left out.
Okay. All right. Let me. I'm going to come back, but let me just address a couple of questions that I've seen thus far. This has been a very investment-oriented kind of discussion. The pipeline actually captures, as you saw with grants and other things, it actually ends with the types of enterprises. The pipeline is meant to capture both enterprises, for-profit, but also NGOs, nonprofits. So we encourage all of you to make sure that get in contact with me and my email so that we get you within that pipeline on both. This is actually the 3rd webinar in a series that Shine has done. They've been very well received. So the bar was very high going into today, and I think we're doing well. And in the earlier webinars, one of which was on our COVID bond work that we're doing in grants. And so that had a real CSO, NGO kind of flavor to it. There are plans moving forward where Shine is looking at the potential for regranting facilities. So Shine is all about both the CSO, NGO, as well as the for-profit enterprise in terms of working at the last mile with women-led and community involvement and the like. And it's also about moving forward with the pipeline in terms of understanding the degree to which enterprises and organizations are women-run, women-owned, so that we want to move this further into gender lens investing as we move on. So that's just a couple of questions there. Savita, there's been a question on the manufacturing of lighting, a couple of questions on it. This is a bit of a technical question, but people maybe thought they heard that you're actually building your own lights, or are you getting those supplied and doing some enhancement to LED lights? Can you talk about LED lights a little bit?
Sure. So what we do is we are partnered up with a local contract manufacturer, and we work with them to get the raw material from them. But the women do the mass manufacturing at the center, and we've looked at what the local market requires, and we see that that particular area, for example, has a lot of need for garment manufacturing and good lighting for these manufacturing setups. So we custom build solution to meet the local market needs here.
Okay, great. If we could allow Sandra on, Sandra would like to talk to the NGO CSO question as well. So if we could let Sandra Smithy on, please.
Yeah, sorry.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi, I'm also part of the Shine team. I work a lot more with the philanthropic side of this with Mark. But one of the notions beyond sort of investing in companies is also this notion of how do you re-grant, and how do you not only support a company, but how do you support the communities and or the development of businesses that can use the companies, which is not necessarily something that companies do well, to be very, very honest with you. There have been many studies out there looking at how do you, just because you bring electricity doesn't mean that businesses will be developed. So how do you create that capacity in communities, and how do you use NGOs in the area to help the companies with that. So how do we create partnerships with the NGOs, CSOs in the region to bring both together so that companies do what companies are supposed to do, and NGOs and CSOs who have that capacity and perhaps relationships in those communities can help those companies do better, and also the communities do better and create more livelihood opportunities. It was just a short piece on that. But Mark and I have been talking about that as we talk about investment, and particularly because this niche of companies is very difficult to invest in, but also they have true challenges on the ground that are not the same as the bigger companies who have more money and who kind of just plow through without worrying about community. And you guys worry about community. So how do we also create synergies and allow for, so that you're not trying to have NGOs and CSOs helping you who don't actually have the funding to do that? So how do we create those synergies?
Sure. In our particular case, that's where the profit sharing model really helps. There are multiple stakeholders. For a community to progress, there are multiple stakeholders that are required to be part of the development. Like, for example, the NGO plays a part, the women play a part, say in our case, the garment manufacturing person plays a part. So once everyone is profiting or earning a little, making profits from the process, everybody is motivated to do better to advance the community. So that's why in our profit sharing model, we have a lot of the stakeholders involved, like the NGO gets 5 to 10% of the profits, which means that they are also working towards development of the community. Then we have a share for the women so that the women get paid equally well. And so they work for their betterment. If for business owners, like, for example, the garment manufacturer, they want to make their profit. So we give them 20% of the profit. Same for solar. So with the profit sharing model, everybody is motivated to do better. And that's why a model like that works better in a community-based model.
Let me, Bertha, can I come back to you?
Yes.
There's an earlier question, and Savitha, if you want to follow up on this as well, I think for both. But Bertha, can you speak to population density a little bit? Sometimes for a lot of this to work, there's a need for a certain density within villages or last mile communities. Where maybe at some density levels, all this works well, maybe at others, it does not work. Can you speak to some of that? That was one of our questions.
Okay, thanks. When we set up a mini grid in a village or a community, then the surveys have been done, and before we actually set up, then we already know what number we are going to target. So once the survey is done, we know we are looking at 250 or 300 people, or one particular community maybe has an institution and 100 people. So we have different communities having different number of customers in them. But as we have seen as Kudura, the number of the customers that we have are at the bottom of the pyramid. 70% of our customers are actually on the low tier, and that's how densely it is in different sites. Because if 70% of the people that we are serving are on the below the tier, on the tier 1 or tier 2, then yes, there's a difference between each community. I don't know whether I answered that, Mark, or I'm going to
I think Lambamba wants to
allow me to add. Yes, allow me to add. I would say that's a very genuine concern. We'll probably face it as we move into other communities. But where we have successfully implemented that model in Busia County and the surrounding regions, the population density is rather dense. So we are not having those challenges as of yet. But we are also aware that there are other parts of this country where the population is so dispersed that it will probably, present serious challenges going forward once we get to those communities. So I think that is a genuine concern that we need to be aware of as developers.
Thank you both. Savitha, do you want to add to that at all?
Sure. We work with partners who we pick nonprofit partners who at least work with 150 to 200 villages. The reason is it takes some effort to train the women and change the community. So we want the production centers to be advantageous to a larger community. So now, for example, these 30 women actually have the power to produce products and create impact for anywhere up to 1 million people. And we have other partnerships in pipeline, which will also serve larger communities at the bottom of the pyramid. So we are very strategic about the partners we work with so that we create a larger impact on the larger scale.
Okay, thank you. We're getting near time here. We're going to reserve a couple of minutes at the end for a little bit of a summary and wrap up. So any other questions, if you want, put them into the chat session. There was a lengthy question regarding going into more of this universal access, Bertha and Lubamba, and going much deeper. I think what I'm going to do is put the two of you together so you can do that. But there's a lot of interest on tiering, on payment, on over time, does the payments change? And I think we've gone deep enough for here, but I'll put you folks together to go even further. And I think there's a lot there for a lot of us to understand. I'm looking quickly at the final couple. Let's see. Yeah, there's a lot of e-mobility question is kind of coming up from Richard Hansen. There's a lot going on there. I was even on a phone call just this week on e-motorcycles and funding that's going to be taking place here very quickly in East Africa and moving towards electric motorcycles. So a lot going on there as well. I think I'm going to wrap it up here and turn it back over to Fletcher. And we're just about on time. So I think that's it, Fletcher. In summary, really quickly for me, know that this is kind of the first generation of the pipeline. It incorporates the NGO side of things. It attempts to, as well as the for-profit side, the earned income model area. We're going to move this even much further towards gender lens investing, which was one of the questions there. So I hope I answered that way. So stay tuned. Please get a hold of me to help build up the pipeline, and know that the pipeline is going to investors out there, but also going to those funders at the faith-based level, foundation level, et cetera, to give them, again, meaningful, actionable research. So Fletcher, please.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, I hope everybody will join me in giving a virtual round of applause to our incredible speakers, to Savitha and Bertha and Lumumba. It's just absolutely great to hear your stories. It's so interesting, it's so important, and it's just, I can't express how good it is to hear about the leadership that all of you are providing. So if you're not a Zoom aficionado, go to the bottom of your screen in the reactions area and use the clapping hands or the confetti emoji so that we can show them our appreciation for all of the good stuff that they've done. That's good. I'm seeing some different colored hands come up, which is great. But thank you all. Oh, good. There we've got some confetti too from Gabriel. So that's what we need. So thank you so much to you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to share. I'd also like to thank Mark Carenti, who's led the development of this pipeline research and the analysis on it. Mark has been reaching out far and wide and is still gathering more information that is incoming from different women-led, community-led enterprises at the last mile around the world. And we're working now on ways to start to make more and more of the research and the key findings public so that they can help inform conversation at the investing and funding levels that Sandra made mention of. A couple of closing comments. At Shine, we are very glad to be sharing this research, and we also are not stopping there. Plans are underway for the launch of a demonstration phase of a Shine investment facility where investments will be made with truly patient, concessional return, values-driven capital to start helping bring more investment capital in appropriate ways into this space. And as a religious leader, I want to underscore the word appropriate. Values-driven investors have an indispensable and truly values-aligned role to be investing in a patient and concessional way in this space. We're playing around with ways to name that class of investment. And as a religious leader, I'm very tempted by the name the infinite return investment class because it emphasizes exactly what this is about. This is about making a massively beneficial social impact in a way that philanthropic groups, religious groups, it couldn't be more mission aligned for them. So stay tuned for more about the investment facility. And again, in closing, many, many thanks to Savita and Bertha and Lumumba and Mark and to all of you for a really, really rich conversation in the chat as well as here in the live space. We'll be sharing with all who registered a link to the recording video, the slides that have been shared, contact information for the presenters, and a list of all of the registrants and their organizational affiliation. And we look forward to being back in touch soon about the next Shine community convening that will take place in March. So many thanks to our speakers. Thanks to Mark for organizing this. And thanks to all of you for joining us. And have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day wherever you are. And we look forward to being back together soon. Take care, God bless, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye now.
Thanks.